of us have ever had a moment in our lives where we opened mouth, insert foot? If you're not raising a hand, you're lying. Ha-ha! Notice I wasn't raising my hand either when I asked that question of myself. You know, words are a big part of our lives, right? Communication, talking, yes, there's body language. Yes, there are many different ways that we communicate, but words are big. Even more so, say, the blueprints of those words. The blueprints of those words are usually the definitions, how we define the words that we're using. We rely heavily on, at times, on the old saying, how many of us know this one? Or how many of us have used this one? It's not what you said, it's how you said it. If you're married, you know that phrase. And the truth is, though, that I think that what we say is actually just as important as how we say it, because words have definitions, and those definitions mean something. So how we say it is one way, but what we say, because of how it's defined, is completely involved and as important. Now, think about this for a minute. In a given situation, in a given conversation or a time, okay, how do you choose your words? Why is it that you are choosing those words to convey what you need to convey? How are those words defined based on what you're communicating in that situation? And who specifically is the beneficiary of those words and their definitions in that particular situation? A lot of times, we may end up molding it to how we want it to fit. It's very common for us to do that. And it makes me think of a young kid, thought he was a hot-shot baseball player. He grabbed his ball, his bat, his glove. He went out to a field all by himself. And he threw the glove on the ground, and he got geared up. He's psyched up. He takes that ball. He throws it up in the air. He takes a swing. Misses. Strike one. Then he starts thinking, I got to convince myself of this. So he grabs the ball and he throws it up. And as it's up in the air, he yells, I am the greatest hitter in the world. And the ball comes down and he swings, whiffs the second time. Strike two. With a little bit of frustration, he musters up some gusto. He picks that ball up again. He throws it even higher in the air and he screams, I am the greatest hitter in the world. And with all his might, he swings through, whiffs a third time. And with emphasis, he goes, strike three, you're out. And he stood there for a second. Then he got a big smile on his face. He picked up his glove and he went, I'm the greatest pitcher in the world. Sometimes how we choose to look at it, how we choose to define it, it defines the entire situation. And how that's communicated not only to ourselves, but to the other people involved in that. Now, here's another question for you. How many of us have ever misused a word or the meaning of a word, maybe taking it out of context? Any of us ever done that? I know I've done that. I mean, there's ways that we communicate in which we definitely take things out of context or twist the meaning in a way. And I think of one particular high-level example of this, and we've actually talked about this. We started the movie series with this. It's in The Princess Bride. Vicini is always saying the word inconceivable. And there's a point in time where he's using that all the time. So Joe, throw it up there. Inigo Montoya, the other character, looks at him and says, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. We have a tendency to do this at times, and my sister would love this part. I'm going to give you some answers. My sister would love this part because she was an English major in college. That's her degree is in English, and so she loves when it comes to grammar. And let me tell you, texting my sister is a whole lot of fun because it better be grammatically and punctuationally correct, or you're going to get a text message back that includes the correction. I think of this. How many of us have heard people say supposedly? It's supposedly. It's a D, not a B. D, not B. Supposedly. I could care less. No. I could not care less. I couldn't care less. It's not I could. You could care less, really. Well, how much less could you care about this? And here's, okay, I gotta admit, this one is probably one of my biggest pet peeves, okay? When we all agree on something, we're not all in agreeance, we're in agreement. Agreement. Agreeance is not a word. It's not in the dictionary. I actually won a $100 bet one time with a guy who was convinced that agreeance was a word and it was in the dictionary. I said, all right, I bet you $100 right here, right now. You go get a dictionary. It's not in there. Easiest $100 I ever made. Now, how about word creation? Anybody ever created words, phrases, things that you've come up with that's your own little thing? My buddies and I used to do this all the time. We used to have a ton of fun with this. We used to take words like, you take fantastic and fabulous, and you put them together, and it's fantabulous. We do that with words. We would also, you've heard this one. Everybody's heard this one. What happens if you don't wear a small and you don't wear a medium? What size do you have? Schmedium. I had a guy look at me once, and he said, I'm going to get you one of those T-shirts. I went, great. He goes, what size are you? And I went, he goes, a schmedium. I was like, okay, yeah, that works. Small, medium, schmedium. Or, how many of us have ever heard the phrase epic fail? Oh, that was an epic fail. Oh, my buddies and I, we used to sit around. We like to people observe when we were at restaurants or wherever we were hanging out. And times there would be people that would have an epic fail as we're observing. But when you're in public like that, you can't really say that out loud. If you do and they hear you, it's kind of not nice. So we would come up with a different way to do it. We would see that instead of saying epic fail, we'd say simply, oh, he's straight gifted. So our phrase was straight gifted. Now, when it comes up to the idea of creating words or putting your own meaning to things and doing that, there's another example that comes to mind. Here, the idea of not knowing a possible meaning, that was Vicini with Inconceivable. But how many of you have ever watched the show Friends? See, one of my favorite characters in there is Joey. And Joey is funny because most of the time, Joey doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But every now and then, he does. And the funny part, though, is he does in ways that you would not expect. And this is a great example of the idea of creating something for yourself and giving it a legitimate meaning. Take a look at this clip.
All right, Rach, the big question is, does he like you? Right? Because if he doesn't like you, this is all a moot point.
A moo point?
Yeah, it's like a cow's opinion. It just doesn't matter. It's moo.
That is hands down one of my favorite moments of all time during that series. My sister actually bought me a magnet that I have that actually says Moo Point and then defines it like that. The funny part is at that time, Rachel and Joey have been sharing an apartment, and she turns and actually looks at Monica and Phoebe, and she goes, have I been living with Joey too long, or did that just make sense? And so now here's the funny thing is, how many of you this week are going to find a way to use Moo Point in a conversation? I know some of you will do it. Somebody's probably going to try and do it to me, too. That's the funny part. You know, we as Christians do this exact same thing with Bible words, Bible concepts. We will do this, and we will define things, and we will create things in our own way. And we do it a lot of times very mistakenly. A lot of times, though, it's very cliche. How many of you right now in your head can just go, oh, yeah, I can think of a really good Christian cliche saying? I'm going to give you a few. You may not agree with me on whether or not they're cliche, but I can tell you I believe they're cliche, and I believe that they should not be used either. I don't really like these. These are the ones that kind of really bug me when I hear them. Here's number one. This is the one I know I'm probably going to get people going, oh, no, I like that. Let go and let God. No, man. Be involved with your Savior. Do something about it. Don't just let go. He doesn't want us to just walk away from something, find His strength, and conquer it. Do not let go and let God. If God needs to take care of it, He'll just do it whether you let go of it or not. Let's be honest. How about this one? God helps those who help themselves. Yeah, there's some people thinking about that one already. No. See, our God is forever faithful no matter what. God is always there to help us regardless. He cares about us regardless of what it is that we may be in at that point in time. Oh, how about this one? People leave churches, they move on, they go somewhere else. And what's the line? You got to have a conversation. I just feel like I wasn't getting fed. If you are leaving a church because you feel like you're not getting fed, it ain't the church's problem. Like, I'm sorry, I've been in too many conversations with people who have dealt with this exact issue. If you're walking away from a church because you don't feel like you're getting what you need, they're not the problem. We'll sit down, we'll talk about that. Yeah, I'll call you out on it, and yeah, you can argue with me till you're blue in the face. But I'll take you in here and show you where that truth exists. Or here is my ultimate favorite peeve of Christian cliches. God will never give you more than you can handle. Bet me, every day of my life I'm probably given more than I can handle. Just look at my children. Trust me. If God wouldn't give us more than we can handle, if He didn't give us more than we can handle, we wouldn't need Him. The whole reason why we deal with the things we do in life is because it's a reminder of the fact that in our weaknesses, He's strong. We need Him to be able to accomplish the things that He puts before us each day. We must rely on Him. So you can bet your bottom dollar there are times when you are going to have situations that's more than you can handle, and you're going to need others, you're going to need Him. That's just the way life works. I think these are all terrible misrepresentations and misconceptions that we do. We throw these things around and act like they're just biblical fact. And when it comes to actual scriptural words and concepts, we actually fail at times even with actual scriptural principles too. A lot of times we actually do have a great idea, a great definition for what it is we're talking about, but we tend to overlook the most important part. We have a tendency to overlook the primary definition or purpose in the word or concept that we're doing. And that's when we end up turning it into a cliche. And it's because we end up interpreting it, moving it forward, and using it in the way that best fits us. It's what we want it to be. So this morning, we're starting a new series, 3 weeks, called Defined. And we're going to be looking at 3 specific topics and 3 specific words that we tend to take out of Scripture and define in our own way and not in the ways that the Bible actually shows us them to be. So, the first one this morning, and let me tell you, I'm excited. I love talking about this, faith, because we so easily misrepresent the idea of faith. Let me ask you this. How would you define it? How would you define faith? I'm interactive here, people. I'm going to come down and just tap somebody on the shoulder if I don't get an answer. How do we define faith? What is believing in something strongly? Believing in the unseen. See, I love it. That's exactly the definition I wanted to hear because now I get to tell you, you're right and you're wrong. Okay. You don't have to agree with me if you don't, but that's okay. I absolutely agree with that definition. I believe that's a very important part, and it does come very much into play with the idea of faith. I think this microphone is screwed up this morning. I can't keep it straight. But here's the thing. Even though that's the common way that we focus on the idea of faith, there is another part to that. See, because when we go to define things, how many of us go to Webster's Dictionary to define a word, and there's like 5 definitions? And you go down, you see definition, number 4, and you're going, oh, yeah, that, I like that. That definition, that's a good definition. There's a reason why definition number 1 is definition number 1. The first definition is always the primary definition. It's the primary reason, the primary purpose behind that word. And the funny part is yes, what you guys told me is a definition of faith, but it's number 2. And it doesn't exist without number 1. We'll get there, but let's start here first. I want to look at Webster's definitions of the idea of faith. It says, an allegiance or duty to a person, fidelity to one's promises, sincerity of intentions. That sincerity of intentions is it's belief and trust in and loyalty to God, belief in the traditional doctrines of a religion, firm belief in something for which there's no proof, complete trust, something that is believed especially with strong conviction. Man, that's a lot of verbiage. I think this morning we're going to sum it up a lot easier than that. So I'm not even going to go into more detail with that. I want to go straight to Scripture. Hebrews 11:1. Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Now the King James actually says a really good version of this. I want you to hear this. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Now look back. What was the definition that you guys gave me? Believe in something the unseen. The evidence of things not seen, the conviction of things not seen. You see how we skipped over the primary definition of faith? This should be our application. This is where the word ends up being less than it truly can possibly be, because we want to apply that second definition. It's the thing that we were taught. Honestly, we've been taught our entire lives that faith is defined by believing in what we don't see. And even though that's correct, it doesn't exist without the primary definition. We have to apply it more directly. And we're still going to get there, but we got to take our steps to get there. Let's break it down. A word picture of the word faith. Okay? Ephesians 6:16. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all of the flaming darts of the evil one. Okay, so now we have a visual word picture of this idea of faith. It's a shield. It's a shield of protection. It's a shield that already exists. It's a shield that we know. So now all of a sudden, faith is becoming something that is actually present with us right now, and it's not just about what we can't see. Notice the description, the definition from Paul here on the shield of faith. It is very important. It is the faith applied that allows us to extinguish the enemy's attacks. So here it is. That first definition in Hebrews 11:1. That nature of that faith applied, okay? It's because when we look at Hebrews, it says that faith is the assurance or substance of things hoped for. We cannot miss this point. We cannot miss the primary definition, because without the assurance of hope, what is there to believe in? That assurance of hope exists because we've seen everything that God has already done, everything that He is doing. And so we have that assurance of hope. That substance lives within us. It is our shield of faith that allows us then to believe in what we have not yet seen that is still to come. That assurance of what He's done allows us to believe and understand that He's going to continue to do that in the future. It's important to apply the primary definition. This is the direct assurance, the promise, the faith that equips us for battle to escape the evil one. Now I want to give us a direct definition this morning. This is how we're going to define it just for this purpose, all right? Faith is a channel of living trust. It's a channel of living trust. It is that assurance that stretches from God to us and back. It's a living trust. Our God is alive, therefore our faith is alive. Everything is living and active. This word is living and active, and this is where our faith comes from. Our assurance of hope is found throughout this book. And if this book is alive, and if this book is part of the weapon, it's also part of the defense. So our faith has to be a channel of living trust. Now follow me here. This is going to sound funny, but follow me. It is the object of faith that makes faith faithful. I'll say it again. It's the object of faith that makes faith faithful. What is the object of faith? God. God is the object of faith, or the promises of God. Like I said, the living and active word. So the object of faith then makes faith faithful. The object of faith is God, the promises of God, the things that we hope for. We trust God to fulfill His promises for the future. These are now the unseen things. And we base that on what He has already fulfilled in the past, that assurance that comes from our hope. So our faith as Christians, actually, I'm going to throw this out here. You tell me if you agree or disagree. our faith is not really truly a blind faith. We want to say that. We want to say that as Christians, we have a blind faith. And a lot of times the people who want to debate, whether it's agnostics or atheists or whoever, they want to debate and say, well, you're just going on blind faith. Actually, I'm not. Maybe I wasn't present for it, but I certainly have an assurance of hope based on what's happened. And everything has always happened exactly as He said it would, so why should I doubt? It's formed on the foundation of God's already proven faithfulness. Lamentations chapter 3, His mercies are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Again, it's the object of faith that makes faith faithful. If God and His promises are the object, and faith is the assurance of our hope in that, so that we can believe in the things that are still yet to come, and we know that God Himself is always faithful to us, then our faith becomes a channel of living trust. The object of faith makes faith faithful. James 2:19. You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. This might be a little paramount here. We can't confuse our faith with the idea of book smarts. Because a lot of times we get a lot of our Christian principles and ideas. I'm not saying this is bad. This is excellent. Continuing education and other resources is great because they're supplemental. Book studies, authors, speakers, podcasts, whatever you're doing, it's good stuff. But a lot of times then we use those books to determine the walk of our faith. We allow those book smarts to become what it is, and that's not the case, man. It's not book smarts. Lots of people believe in the trustworthiness of strong Christian leaders. A lot of people do. A lot of us believe in these people. We believed in Billy Graham, John Piper, Craig Rochelle, Brian Henderson. We believe in these people. You know, I mean, this is trusted Christian leaders, and we believe in them. But just because we see them as trustworthy, it doesn't mean that the message is always completely connected to the idea of reality. We're all still fallible in what we communicate at times. And so it can't be based on the idea of book smarts. It's kind of like when Jesus talks about the people as seeds in Matthew 13 and the different seeds that fell in the different areas. And some that grew and died off, and some that didn't grow at all, and some that grew and flourished. Some people have knowledge of what the Bible speaks, but they may not have the saving faith. Others believe it, agree with it, but because of their choice not to change their hearts, it doesn't go anywhere. See, these kinds of people, they're like those demons James was talking about. There's no visible application. See, that's another avenue of faith that I think sometimes I'm not going to go deep into detail with this, but it's one of those avenues that I think maybe we completely step over, and that is that faith requires action. A tree will be known by its fruit. If we're not bearing any fruit, if we're not putting to action what we're claiming to believe, how is anybody else supposed to understand, gain that knowledge, and join us? Then still others, they find that justifying faith. They not only know that know about the gospel. They don't just know it, they agree with it. But then they're also continually transformed, as Paul says in Romans 2. How? By the renewing of your mind. This is the study aspect. This is the fact. The object of faith makes faith faithful. If our faith is to be faithful, we have to be in communication here. This is unbelievably important. The primary difference, and we overlook, those last people get it. Belief does not define faith, because even demons believe. Belief is not enough on its own. You've got to put it to action. True belief, true faith, comes from the hope of what has been and what is to come, and how we build our foundation on that assurance. I want to give you one of the greatest examples of that assurance of hope, as we defined it earlier, that channel of living trust. And it's in Luke chapter 7. After he'd finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent him to the elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He's worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation. He's the one who built us our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble for yourself, for I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word, and let my servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority, with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. This centurion, this wasn't just belief. This was an assurance of hope. He didn't need the physical presence of Jesus. He'd heard what he'd done. He knew what he had already done. He believed in the substance of things that had already occurred, and because of that, he even admitted, he goes, "I don't need your physical presence. I just need you to say, 'Your servant be well,' and I know it'll happen." This was faith based on the assurance of hope. Even Jesus himself said, "I have not found faith like this anywhere in Israel." It was enough for him to know that his servant would be healed. The centurion was simply ready to just take God at his word. Others are mentioned in Hebrews that had this same living trust of times in their lives. You're going to know these people. How about Noah? God says, "Hey, Noah, build an ark." Uh-huh. "I'm going to flood the earth. You'll need the boat." Uh-huh. No, that wasn't Noah's reaction. "Okay, Lord, how am I building it?" "Oh, that's how you're going to build it." "Okay, how long do I got?" "Okay, I got this." He took God at his word. How about Abraham? "Abraham, I want you to uproot everything you know, and you're going to go to this land that I promised you, and I'm going to make you a mighty nation." Uh-huh. No, he took God at his word. Sitting right here, right now, we're a picture of the promise of God fulfilled through the faith of Abraham. And Sarah, she was way past the age of childbearing. God said she'd have a son. Right? She laughed. She did. But then she took God at his word. And she had a son. We have to take God at his word. Just like we communicate with each other, so God communicates with us. And when he does, "Yes, Lord." Every person mentioned in Hebrews as an example simply took God at his word. Their faith was built upon that living trust. You know, I think of one more person. This isn't in there, but I have to talk about this one. How many of us remember the story of the woman who had an interior illness, bleeding inside? She'd had it for years. This is assurance of hope. She'd heard about Jesus. She'd heard about everything he'd done, and all she could think of was, if I can just touch the hem of his cloak, I will be healed. I just got to find a way to squeak through. I just got to reach out and touch. I just got to touch what it may have been the filthiest part of Jesus. The hem of his cloak that drug on the ground was dirty and gross and wet and muddy. But all I got to do is touch that. Jesus could feel the power go out from him. And what did he tell her? "You may go, woman, your faith has healed you." That is so real. Wrap your minds around that. How many of us think we have a faith like that right now? Think about everything we're dealing with right now in society, in our world. Is our faith so strong that we believe that we could reach out and simply touch even the hem of Jesus' cloak and things would be healed? Shameless plug. Be here for the day of prayer. Let's put it to action. Let's find that faith. Let's regain that channel of living trust. See, God is always concerned about what we go through. He's always going to be there in all of it. But I think it's more important is this. God is more concerned about how we respond to what we go through. So how are we responding right now to what we're going through? How's our response going? Is your faith alive? Are you responding based on evidence, or are you responding based on the assurance of hope? Here's the meat of it. Application ideas. Faith always involves assurance and conviction. It's not going to be one or the other. It's got to be both. Faith is being sure of what we hope for. Being sure, no doubt, no questioning, no fear. This is absolutely it. I hope in it, I know it, I do not deny it, and I'm going to live for it. Means we got to give something of substance. We have to make it a reality. Faith is the certainty of what we do not see. We look for the proof. We test it that it may be applied, both past, present, and future. It's the assurance of what He's done, the conviction of what He's going to do. Piece it together, we discover that faith is certain that what is believed is real, and that desire of that belief, it will eventually come to pass. You know, I think about this in my own road with ministry. It's extremely applied. When we realized that we were going to be leaving Goshen, it wasn't necessarily a happy moment. We loved the town. We loved the people. We loved the church. It was deeply rooted in us. We thought we were going to be there for quite a while. We really did. We struggled to find the channel of living trust when we found out God was saying move. But we had to apply the situation to the primary definition. We had to be grounded in the assurance of hope. We'd never seen God not take care of us. We'd never seen Him not do more than we could ask or imagine. He'd always done it before. Why wouldn't He do it again? The problem is that in our lives, we can't see His timing in it, because His timing is always different from our timing. But that's because faith always involves things that are yet still to come. We have to have assurance and conviction, but it always involves things that are yet still to come. Hope is our key word that we've been focusing on in the definition and defining quality of faith. That hope is always pointing toward the future and what is to come. Hope doesn't necessarily, the assurance is what we see from what is past, but hope itself, hope never looks back, it looks forward. The hope that is our faith is what allows us to trust in God rather than in our own ability. And without that foundation of hope and faith being in God, we're honestly just sitting around in wishful thinking. We're sitting around dreaming about what could be if we're not grounded in that idea of that hope. Because that hope is that channel of living trust. When it comes to our lives in ministry, we desire things. In anybody's life, we all desire things. We all look at the way we wish things could be. Here's what I'd really like to have versus what I've got. We've all got our ideas of what our wants are and what our needs are. And if you're married, husbands and wives have a different idea of wants and needs. So do children. At times, I guarantee you, Abby and I don't see eye to eye on it. But when we dream, honestly, in many ways, it's wishful thinking, because those dreams are based on our timing and our plans and what we think is best. And we end up living outside of the idea of reality. And it's hard to continue to dream in that mindset because our faith for what God has out there for us, what that has to do is it has to leave the dreaming and wishful thinking behind. And in our faith of what is yet to be seen, we have to be content with what God's concept is. We can dream all we want, but what He provides is what we have to be content with. When you learn to be content with what God provides, usually it's more than what you've dreamt up in your head. The big part of that is when it comes along, then you see the faithfulness of God in it. Now, if it requires assurance and conviction, and it always involves things yet to come, it always has as its object the things that are presently unseen. The object of faith is what makes faith faithful. Physically, we don't see God, per se. But think about it for a moment. Most of the things we take on faith, we don't see, right? Even our assurance of hope in the things that we're going, we read about it. We didn't see it happen, but we read about it, and when we apply it, we see the truth that is involved in it. But faith has as its object things that are presently unseen. Think about some other things that maybe we don't see right now that apply to that object idea. Heaven, the promised resurrection of the saints, eternal life with Jesus. And like I said, even Jesus himself at this point. I mean, think about it. He told Thomas, "Blessed are you, Thomas, for believing and seeing, but even more blessed are those who have not seen and yet still believe." Amazing things seem to start to happen when we focus on the unseen realities of God. When our assurance of hope applies what has been, what is, and adds that to what will be. When we apply that and we lose the idea that we're going to base it on our human senses, then what God is doing in our lives starts to become visible in all kinds of different ways. That faith begins to enable us to begin making God-honoring decisions based on those unseen realities. Most of the time, the decisions we make, the way we communicate, the way that we talk about things, we should do that with a forward movement mindset of the things that we know God's going to do that we haven't yet already seen. And I just I have such a terrible other Christian cliche walking into my head right now. You're so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good. Honestly, the more heavenly minded we are, the better we are here. Because if we are focused in faith on the things that are not yet seen, it causes us to work toward those. I remember being certain that we were going to end up being in Goshen for like 20 plus years. And that was going to be our place. And certainly God would not have provided such an amazing place and an amazing opportunity if He was going to move us quickly. Abby and I couldn't see the benefits of not staying there. So it took time for us to be content when we applied a living trust to the idea that we were moving away from there. We struggled because as we continued to seek His next step, that next location, there were a lot of amazing doors that we thought was going to be it. We went, oh my gosh, yeah, look at this opportunity. This really could be better. And then, door slammed shut. But that's where the application of the faith came into play. We needed a new perspective. We needed that new focal point because faith always involves maintaining our focus on God. Assurance and hope, things that are still yet to come, things that are presently unseen, maintaining our focus on God. When our commitment level to God's ability dwindles, that's when it's easy to see our faith fall apart. Because when our commitment isn't there, He's still faithful, but we don't choose to recognize it as easily. Trusting in God's ability to act becomes much more difficult at that time. But without that faith, it'd be impossible to even truly believe that God exists. Remember, we have to have that assurance of hope if the belief is going to exist. Without the hope in what yet has already occurred and what is occurring, there's no point in believing what yet is to come. I don't know how to truly verify or prove God. You go, oh yeah, prove the existence of God. I mean, yeah, I could talk about that. I could tell you why I think he's real to me. I can tell you the ways that I have seen him show up. But that's not necessarily going to convince somebody. My words just trying to defend it. I mean, at the same time, on the other side, somebody got, okay, prove he doesn't exist. And they could talk till they're blue in the face. You will know a tree by its fruit. Faith in action. It's through the living trust, the assurance of hope, because of things in my life past and in all our lives that I'm going to know and believe the present and the future. So if a tree is known by its fruit, let me ask you a question this morning. By watching our lives, by watching your life, by watching my life, could someone else conclude that God exists? By watching your life, could someone conclude that God exists? God's intended for our lives to be lived in a way that allows the world around us to see Jesus in both a physical and practical way. And the only way for that to happen is to remain completely focused on Him. Recently, I was brought into the presence of God in a way that I couldn't even speak. There were no words. I couldn't say anything. I was just overcome. But I could feel His embrace. I could feel His Spirit awakening something within me. I knew that He was speaking. And that's why He had me silent with nothing to say. Because He was grabbing me by the heart and saying, just listen. I was taken back to David in the Psalms, 37, 4 and 5. It says, delight yourself in the Lord, He'll give you the desires of your heart. You're going, oh, that's awesome. Yes, I can do that, and I'll get everything that I want. Then you got to read on, though, because David says in verse 5, commit your ways to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will act. Delight and commit. Desires, action. That was my new perspective. The full commitment, the trust, to let Him act in His time. And with this new perspective in our hearts, we applied our living of trust and the assurance of what He'd promised. We refocused ourselves at God being the center in everything. Trying to remember that He needed to be a part of everything. Structure changed in Abby and I's marriage. It changed in our relationship with our children. It changed in how we approach each day. Because our ministry, and this is what God was screaming to me, your ministry is not a building. It's not a building. It's the location of wherever we are together, where we're gathered in the love of God and His provision at that place and time. And when our focus is completely on God and our faith is alive, that's when another promise comes into play, that His timing, His will, it's greater, that He can do more than we ask or imagine. So He brought us here. Applying that channel of living trust, and we come here. Just when we think we're strung out and have no idea what's next, God grabs you by the heart and says, just listen and wait. Whether it was the welcome we received upon discovering we were coming here, or the help moving, or the people reaching out to us in various ways with unbelievably good home-baked goods, the opportunity that we've been given here to be a part of this family and to be in this position, the love that I see that the people in this church family have for each other and for this community. the prayer warriors that are here every Tuesday night, giving everything they've got to cover every aspect of this place in prayer. And I'll tell you what, I am now in begging mode with God. You've broken us 3 different times. Each time you brought us back to that assurance of hope. Now, God, please allow us to put down some roots. Let us be planted and use us for your kingdom here on a longer platform. Instead of just taking 4 steps, can we take like 150 before you might move again? Move here. Do something here. Build here. I mean, we're building a house. Please, God, don't let us live there for 2 years and be gone. Ultimately, the coolest part about this is seeing the follow-through that comes from God. I hate the fact that I have to constantly come back to a point in my life where I have to revisit the idea of assurance of hope. Everything that he's done, everything that he is doing, why in the world do I ever step away and fall away and not have that assurance of hope? Dang, I hate being human. I want to challenge us to join in and try to really hunker down and focus on that channel of living trust. Really drive it home inside our hearts and apply what that really means to every situation. The object of our faith is what makes faith faithful. So let's put that perspective on Jesus. Let's be assured that the hope produces the evidence that we need to believe in the things that are unseen. Don't overlook the primary definition in Hebrews 11:1 of the idea of what faith is. Believe in what you can't see. Understand that he's going to be faithful and it's not going to go away. But do that because you have an assurance of hope in the faith that comes from God and all that he has done, is doing, and is going to do. It's meant to be a living organism that's in our lives. So I challenge you to join me, and we can hold each other accountable on this, to work hard day in and day out to make our faith a channel of living trust. Let's pray. Father, thank you that most of all, even when we fail and we fall, even when we're straight gifted, you, Lord, you're still faithful. So faithful, in fact, that you will do whatever it takes in those times. 2x4 to the head or squeeze around the neck. Whatever it takes, Father, to get us to remember that the object of faith is what makes faith faithful. That when that perspective is gained and we're back on that assurance that leads to the conviction, that opens up the lines of communication, that creates that channel of living trust, Lord, that's a much better place to be. Because worry, doubt, fear, questioning, that all ends up getting thrown out the window because we know, Father, ain't nothing too big for you. Lord, light that fire inside us. Make that our challenge. Help us to be defined in your concept of faith. We love you, Jesus. We pray this in your name. Amen.